When you review a lot of cases like we do here at Key Guru, throughout the year you tend to see a lot of stuff that's regurgitated, maybe the odd RGB fan added here, the odd bit of tempered glass changed round, an airflow panel perhaps. It starts to maybe become a little bit repetitive and probably for some could be a little bit boring as well. So when something that is genuinely new or innovative or unique or particularly interesting comes along, we start to get a little bit excited. That's exactly what we're going to be looking at in this review today. There's a new case on the market and we think that if you're in the market at the moment, maybe looking for a new case, this might change your mind. So make sure you stick around and carry on watching. As you probably already guessed, the new case that we're looking at today is this one from a company called Geometric Future. It's a new name to the market, especially in the European market. They already have one or two products on their website, so worth heading over there and checking those out if you're interested in looking at something new and different. This one is the Model 8 CowBoy. There's actually a few different versions of this case, but we chose this one because it was probably the most interesting in terms of the aesthetics, although the other ones also look pretty interesting as well. There's different combinations of materials that are used, but they all basically share the same core chassis structure. So this case is made up of various different materials. So the core chassis is made out of a 1mm thick sheet steel, and then on the front you've got a brushed aluminium panel, and that is real aluminium. It's not just plastic that's made to look like aluminium. And then, as you might have noticed, on the sides there's tempered glass panels. These are 4mm thick tempered glass and they are symmetrical on both sides, which is nice. It gives it an all-round symmetrical and understated minimalist look, which I like. And then at the top of these tempered glass panels there's a small section that's trimmed with real cowhide. So leather on a PC case from the factory is definitely something I don't think I've seen before, and it's one of the reasons why we chose it, and obviously the reason why it's called the CowBoy. You'll notice as well along the front I/O that's also trimmed in leather. You even get a power button that's trimmed in leather, so that's one thing that makes it different at least. So you can currently pick this up from amazon.co.uk, priced at just under £170. In terms of its size, it's similar to a regular mid-tower ATX case. It measures 500mm tall, 500mm deep, and about 230mm wide. So it's not the biggest and it's not the smallest mid-tower either. I know what you're thinking already. It's got a completely solid front panel, and normally that would be a problem. We'd be worried about the amount of airflow that's coming in from the front, but if you take this front panel off, you'll see it's held on with some pins. Possibly you could swap that out for a different style front panel if you want. And then behind it again is another completely blocked front panel. So that kind of leads me on to the next main feature of the case. If we just spin it round this way and remove this side panel, so that's held on with thumb screws and it just slides and removes. You can see on the top there is the leather trim, and then it's quite a dark tint, which you'll notice as well, but it's a nice solid 4mm thick tempered glass panel. So as you can see now from the inside, it's not a traditional ATX layout. You've got the power supply shroud at the front, just behind that completely blocked front panel. We've got a large vent down at the bottom here as well. So obviously the airflow is going to be coming in from the bottom. And then we also got a completely vented rear panel as well. So I guess we're looking at an airflow path coming from the bottom out the back, and there's also a fan mount up in the top here as well, so airflow can pass out through the top, because on the top you have another vented panel that just slides backwards. You can see that's a perforated metal top panel, completely vented. And then in the top of the case, if I just tilt it down, you can see we've got all the rear PCIe slots, the rear fan, rear I/O cut out, and the power supply cut out as well. So as I've said, it's not a traditional layout. Everything's going to be kind of mounted 90 degrees from normal. So the graphics card will be vertically mounted here. CPU will be over this side. I'm guessing I'll be installing a radiator at the back here, maybe some fans at the bottom, and then, like I said, the power supply fits in at the front there. So it's completely different to normal, and it should give you a completely different look to your system as well. So that's another reason why we're really interested in taking a look at this case. Whether it makes building a system easier or more difficult, who knows, but we'll find out. In terms of specifications then, on the front panel, you can see pretty decent front panel connectivity. Power button, 2 USB 2.0 ports, 2 USB 3 Type A ports. We've also got a USB 3.1 Gen 2, so I think that's a 10 gigabit per second port, 3.5mm audio jacks. So inside, as I've already said, we've got this different layout, but we still have similar features to other ATX cases. So maximum CPU cooler height is 170mm, maximum GPU length is 400mm, so that'll cover any GPUs on the market today, I guess. In terms of cooling, so in the bottom of the case you can fit up to a 360mm radiator. That also means you could fit either 320mm fans or 240mm fans. You can fit 280mm radiators in here as well, 240s in the bottom of the case as well. In the back, that allows you for a slightly bigger radiator to be installed in there, so you can fit up to a 420mm radiator. Obviously 360s, 280s, 240s will also fit in there as well, and that also means you can fit up to 3 140mm fans or up to 320mm fans in this back panel. Motherboard support, in here you can fit up to a eATX motherboard, so that also includes ATX, micro ATX and mini ATX. There's 7 PCIe slot cutouts for, I would normally say for horizontal mounting, but it's all vertically mounted in here, but 7 cutouts for connecting directly to the motherboard slots, and then there's 3 what would normally be vertical mounts as well. So although it's kind of flipped around 90 degrees, you still get the same kind of support for cooling and hardware as you would in a normal ATX case. And then the other side panel, that again just has 2 thumb screws all in position. Quite interesting, these thumb screws as well, they're a bit different, they're like square, and then again you just slide it backwards and the side panel just removes it again. That's basically the same as the other side panel, so you get a nice symmetrical look, and again it's tinted to the same degree. And then around this right hand side you can see we've got some cables there for the front panel. There's the slot for the power supply, so that goes in from this side and then screws in from the top, and you've got a bit of a vent here, so I guess you're best off putting your fan facing outwards so you get some airflow coming through the case and then out through the top for the power supply. Looks like there's plenty of space there for cable routing. In terms of cable management as well, at the back of the case here, you've got approximately 29mm of space between the side panel and the motherboard tray, so that sounds like a healthy amount. Looking at it now, it looks like there's plenty of space there for cable management. And then in terms of storage, you've got a lot of little brackets on the back here, so there's 4 in total. Again, these are just held in place with thumb screws. They're captive thumb screws as well, which is good. And these brackets will allow you to install either 2.5-inch drives or 3.5-inch drives there, so that's good. It's like a universal bracket for both. You just screw your drives to that, slide them back in place and hold them in position with the thumb screws. From the factory you get 4 of these brackets, so you can fit either 4, 3.5 or 2.5-inch drives. There are an additional 2 mounting slots here as well, so you could potentially get a couple more and you can add up to 6 drives in total. If we just flip it round onto its side so we can have a look at the bottom. Now this is one thing I'm slightly not so much worried, but have a bit of concern about. These feet at the bottom here, they do cover quite a lot of the opening to the bottom of the case. So if the airflow is coming in from the bottom, you've only really got this gap for the airflow to come in. The feet are not that tall, they're only about 20mm tall. I don't know whether it might be better to have these feet a bit shorter and a bit taller just to allow a bit more of a gap for airflow, but we'll see how it works later. We'll build a system and do a bit of thermal testing on it anyway. So these feet do wrap all the way around, so that's meant to give the case good stability, so it's not easy to knock over. Not that it's not really something that happens that often anyway, but you can also see at the bottom there's a magnetic filter on there, and it's a plastic frame with like a woven material on there, and you can see the rest of the bottom of the case is very open for airflow, for fans or radiators or whatever you're going to have installed there. So in terms of modularity, the only things that remove from the case for installation are the hard drive mounts, but you also, on this back panel, remove some screws remove 3 screws from either side, and then there's these rails. So what you do with these rails is you attach these to your radiator, and then you can put your radiator or all-in-one CPU cooler in while attached to these rails, and then screw it back into the case at the back there. So that's an interesting feature as well. And another thing that is interesting about this case and how the AIO or the radiator installs, you can either fit it this way around with the tubes at the bottom going up to the CPU cooler, or you can fit it with the tubes at the top, and they kind of come through this top section and then down into the case and then to the CPU cooler. So that's what I might try, because sometimes it looks a little bit untidy with the AIO tubes trailing around the system and having to like bend them round stuff and that. So I might try it in that top position with the tubes coming through. So we'll see how that goes when we do the build. So because this is a brand new chassis that I've never worked with before, for the build I want to make sure that I push it to its limits, I guess. So for the motherboard, I'm going to be using this X570 Aorus Extreme. So this is an E80X motherboard. E80X support is available in this case. CPU is the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X, so it's a 12-core 24-thread CPU. For graphics, I'm going to be using the RTX 3080 Aorus Master, big card, that one is. Memory is this G-Skill Trident Z RGB. This is a 32GB kit, so 4 8GB modules, and it's DDR4 3600 MHz C16. Storage will be the PNY XLR8 Gaming CS3040. This is a PCIe Gen 4 M.2 NVMe drive. Cooling the CPU is one of the new coolers from Geometric Future. So this is a 360mm all-in-one CPU cooler called the Eskimo Junior, I think it's called, 36. So 360mm liquid cooler. And then powering the whole system is the Seasonic Prime Titanium. This is the 850 watt version, so the TX850. So the build's finished, as you can see. If I'm being honest, with this being a brand new case from a new manufacturer, I was expecting problems with this build, I'm not going to lie. But I'm happy to say that once you get your head around the fact that everything's rotated by 90 degrees and graphics card is vertically installed, etc., and the fact that you have to remember that cables are going to be in different places to normal with ATX cases, once you get your head around that, it's as easy building this case as it is in any other as well. So I'm happy with how the build went. Again, it took about the same time as it would do in any other ATX case. There's a few features that I really like. I like the fact that you can run the tubing for the AO in this top section and then down onto the CPU block. It just makes it look a little less messy with the tubes trailing around the system. It just neatens everything up a little bit. The only problem with running the tubing like that is getting the radiator down into position. I did try and angle it in and upwards, but that wasn't going to happen. So you have to kind of slide the radiator with the fans down from the top. The only issue with that is the gap is only big enough for a standard 27mm radiator with 25mm fans. So if you've got anything bigger than that, you're going to be struggling. If you're building a custom loop with a bigger radiator, you're not going to have that problem because tubing won't be connected up there anyway, and you can connect that up after. So it's not really a problem. And I quite like the look of this system rotated 90 degrees. Different to what we normally see. We like different here at Kit Guru. The only issue again with that is your graphics card, any logos or anything on the graphics card are obviously not in the correct orientation to read them. And with a card like this 3080 Aorus Master, where you've got that little LCD display, obviously everything on that display is reading the wrong way around. But other than that, I like how it looks. The memory for me is a good one because logos or whatever on the memory, that's the correct way around. Obviously with the CPU block you can rotate the orientation of that to get that the correct way around. So I like how it looks. There are one or two other minor things. I wish we had some grommets along the cutouts, what would normally be the side of the motherboard, but down at the bottom. I think that looks a little bit untidy without any grommets there. Another thing in terms of cable management, when you start managing the cables around the back of the system, you look at it and think, well, there's no eyelets or anything to tie your cables down to. But when you look a bit closer, there are some small cutouts that Geometric Future have put into the motherboard tray, and then you can slide through Velcro straps that they provide. So it turns out that that's more probably me thinking like a traditional case where you've got the eyelets that stick out. Geometric Futures thought of a slightly different way of doing it, that's all. And the Velcro straps, they work really well. And actually, once you get everything in place and get your wiring all in place and planned out where you want it to go, you can actually strap everything down and it looks really neat and tidy around there. So again, nothing really to complain about in terms of the build. One thing that I did find slightly concerning while building the system is how close the GPU fans and the AIO fans are. Now, maybe this is not such a problem, but the thing that's going through my mind is the GPU fans are pulling one way and then the AIO fans are pulling air the opposite way. So the air's coming in from the bottom. Then maybe this could be some kind of conflict between the GPU and the AIO fans when they're trying to pull air in opposite directions, and maybe one of the components might suffer in terms of the thermal performance because of that. If the AIO fans are stronger than the GPU fans, maybe the air will be diverted more towards the AIO. So it may not be such a problem if you have a slightly thinner card. The 3080 Aorus Master in this system, it's a 3.5 slot card, so it is a real fat wide boy, but it's something I definitely want to look at in the thermal testing, which leads me on nicely to the thermal testing. If you've seen any of my case reviews before, you'll know that I like to run a combined CPU and GPU thermal test. So I run the 3D Mark TimeSpy Extreme Stress Test for 60 minutes in a loop, simultaneously running the Cinebench R23 benchmark, again in a loop for 60 minutes. That fully loads the system and gets everything up to temperature, so it gives you a good idea how the case will perform in a heavy load situation. So to begin with, during the thermal testing, I had the AIO CPU cooler mounted at the back of the case with the fans blowing out as an exhaust. And in that configuration, CPU temperature is perfectly fine. The average CPU delta was 56 degrees, which meant an actual component temperature of around 74 degrees. However, I think GPU temperature was affected by that conflict in airflow. As you can see, the average GPU delta temperature was 64 degrees, which meant the actual GPU temperature was running about 81 degrees on average. So the other option was then to flip the AIO fans. So instead of the fans exhausting air out of the back of the case, I flipped them round so they were working as an intake, pulling air towards the GPU. I did have one concern about that. I wondered, well, maybe we're going to just then be pushing warm air onto the GPU, and that could potentially have a negative impact on GPU temperature. Flipping the AIO fans actually dropped the CPU temperature by almost 10 degrees C, pulling cool air in from the back of the system, and it also had a positive impact on the GPU temperature as well, dropping the GPU delta by about 5 degrees C on average. As you can also see from the chart, I ran the case with the left-hand tempered glass side panel removed, and that again had a positive impact on temperature. As we normally see in case testing, removing the side panel dropped the GPU temperature considerably, but it had a lesser effect on the CPU temperature. In terms of noise levels, in either configuration, we were looking between 46 to 48 decibels. And as we've seen before, removing the side panel lowers the GPU temperature, which therefore has an impact on the noise levels, and actually running the case with its side off reduces the noise. So overall, I think this is a solid attempt from a company that's new to the market. It looks different externally with the combination of brushed aluminium and leather. I like those symmetrical tempered glass side panels no matter which way around you have the case. It looks great. Internally, I like that 90 degrees rotated look. Again, it's different from what we're used to seeing. The bottom to top or bottom to side airflow path seems to work. I was slightly concerned that the gap down at the bottom wasn't big enough for airflow, but it seems fine. If you put your hands over those fans at the bottom, you can feel nice cool airflow coming in. There's a couple of things I'd like to see maybe changed or improved. Obviously those grommets I'd like to see on those cutouts down at the bottom of the motherboard. It does look a little bit untidy with those being open and being able to see the cables trailing through. One other thing as well I'd like to see is maybe some fans being bundled with the case as well. To be fair to Geometric Future, the price at £169.90 is pretty reasonable as it is, especially when you take into consideration that this is something different, it's something new, and you could say the premium materials with leather and brushed aluminium. But for that price, you are just getting a bare bones chassis. I would like to have seen at least maybe 3 fans that can be placed on the bottom of the case, and maybe a fan controller in there for that price. But can't be too hard on them, because I think they could have gone the other way and tried to be a bit too clever with the pricing, saying that, you know, it's a really unique case and bump the price up even more. So I think the price is pretty fair. I like how the way the case looks. I think it has got a real good look to it. And if you look on the Geometric Future website, you can see the other cases and they all have a unique look to them. So I think they've got enough combinations of different materials to probably please anyone's style. And also it's a simple case to build in. Even having that different orientation, rotated 90 degrees, it's just as easy to build in this case as it is in any other. There might be a slight problem with the IO being near to your graphics card, but as I've said, if you have a slightly smaller graphics card, it probably won't be as much of a problem. The optimal way we found was to have the AIO fans pulling air in from the back. There's no dust filter on the back, so that might be an issue. You might find that if you do run it that way, the AIO radiator clogs up with dust quite quickly. But if you're keen on system maintenance and, you know, take care of it, it's not a problem. Or you could borrow a pair of your wife's old tights, make your own filter or something like that. So it's not much of an issue, but it's something worth thinking about. If you're building a custom loop in there with a water-cooled graphics card, you're not going to have that problem, because there'll be obviously no graphics card fans. So overall, it's a case that I really like. I'd probably buy one myself, and I think it's decent value for money. So thanks for watching this review of the Geometric Future Model 8 CowBoy. If you like this case, or if you've got anything to say about it, let us know in the comments section. And if you want to help support Kit Guru, if you like what we do, you can always head over to our store, pick up some of our merch, or even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.